It'll just go completely out of focus on its own. This is after you've parfocaled it. And then when you let go of the button, when you're not touching it, it'll gradually go back into focus. If you see that, that means the zoom pod is sticking and it needs to be replaced or repaired. You see that on Zeiss microscopes more often than Leica microscopes. But you do see it. So it's really important that when you're running the functions of the microscope that you're actually looking inside the system. Then I'll run the focus. I'll make sure that the focus runs its full range. Then I also just feel the knobs and make sure that the knobs are able to turn and they feel smooth, they're not grinding. On the OH4s, especially the older scopes, what will happen is this knob will get hit, it will get bent, and then all of a sudden it starts to cause tension on that motor. And it'll eventually wear that motor out. So just making sure this is real effortless when you turn these knobs. Same with the zoom. I'll press that in, move that, make sure that the zoom, manual zoom is functioning. I then check the iris like we've done already. I expand the light iris and I reduce it. Once you've done that, you've disrupted the iris. The iris is set to change in relation to the zoom. So I'll hit this reset. I'll make sure that the iris actually resets. And then when I run the zoom, what I'm wanting to see is that the iris is actually changing with the zoom. That's how the system should function all the time. So if it's not doing that, make sure you hit that reset button. Then I touch this button over here on the side. This is a focus lock. That's used when they're putting a laser on the system. It'll lock the focus in one position. So I test, make sure that the focus is actually not working when that lock is engaged. And then I release the lock and make sure the focus starts running, which in this case it is. So once I've tested all those things, the last and final portion of the PM is balance. So on the Leicas, I'll run these manual balance buttons. I run them back and forth. I make sure that the motors aren't whining, that you're actually getting good travel out of the motors themselves. This also gives me an opportunity to mess it up. So I'll leave it to where it's out of balance. Then I come over here. First of all, on the Leicas, there's a green arrow here and a green arrow there. If you don't already know that, you should always, when you're balancing it, line those green arrows up. And then there's an A. A is when this A balance is facing you. B is when the B balance is facing you. And there's a line here to indicate that. At this stage, you probably already are aware of this, but I'm just going over it. So we want to make sure that the green arrows are lined up and that the A is lined up. Then I come over here, and I hit the auto balance button here. So you should just immediately get A to balance pretty effortlessly. Then we move it to the B position. On the Leicas, what will happen is you just keep on going and it'll eventually lock up when you get to the right position. So don't try to guess where B is, just move it until the system locks. And when it locks, then you're ready to hit auto balance again. So at this stage, what's going to happen is it's going to run B, it's going to run C, and it's going to run D. C is typically where most of your problems occur. And there's a sensor on the inside of this panel here that fails. So right now, this C is it just keeps running. And this one failed earlier, so I know that there's a problem with this system. So if it continues to run one direction all the way to a limit, it's almost always that this C sensor has failed. So we'll let it run its paces. What that'll look like in the error log, which we'll go back and look at, is you'll see a C balance sensor failure or a C balance error, a B balance error, and a D balance error. So we go to the check light has illuminated. So we have a C error and a D error. You'll see D errors typically when the weight goes all the way to its mechanical limit. So if it goes to its mechanical limit, you'll actually just see it pop up. In the case of the C error, this one is very specific because usually that means there's a major failure. So we hit commit, this is going to clear the checklist, and then we're also going to go into the service menu because we have to clear that out as well. So if I see a failure like that, I'll try to balance it a couple times. Sometimes, if the C has failed, sometimes it'll recover. But if you get a failure on the C, I usually almost always have that added to the PM report. That C-balance sensor needs to be replaced. The D-balance errors and the B-balance errors are almost always telling you correct information. There's not a failure of the sensor usually, it's that there's too much weight. And oftentimes there'll be this is a weight plate here for the A and B. Sometimes there's added weight there that's not necessary, and then the D-balance will have too much weight on it as well. That's coming from factory. So the D-balance errors and the B-balance aren't as critical, but the C-balance is definitely a critical error. And if you ever see this, where it's gone to one end of the range, so remember, the C-balance is driving the car, C for car. So if you see that failure, you're changing out that sensor. That sensor is $1,350. So now it's $10,000, like $11,000, $12,000 for this PM. Before I leave, knowing that this is not functioning, what I'll do is I'll physically manually balance this. I do that, and then I inform staff that the balancing system has failed and to not auto balance it until I've repaired it. So that way they're not having any sort of errors like that after I've left the building. Because the last thing you want to do is have Biomed calling you and saying, hey, you just did a PM, what's going on? So I just try to be very clear about what's happened. I let them know that the sensor has failed, I'll come back with the sensor and get that repaired. Just don't balance it for the time being. I balanced everything is in good working order. So once that's manually done, I'm just testing to make sure it's good, and then we're good to go. At that stage, the PM is basically done. So I just make sure, at this point, what I'll do is I will inform staff. So as you're already aware, they're busy. So I keep it very short and sweet when I'm talking to the coordinators or the director. What I'm explaining to them is, we have a problem. I go over the light bulb. It's really important to inform them, teach them about light bulbs, right? We go over the brake, just quickly kind of step by step say, hey, we have a floor brake that's bad, light source, kind of teach them about the light source. The fiber optic cable's bad, and C-balance sensor has failed. I'm going to get those fixed. I will work with Biomed to get that all taken care of. You will see me in the next week with parts. What I found with the coordinators and the directors, they really don't care to hear about all the technical aspects of the problems. They just want to know, okay, there's a problem, can we use it? And usually what I'll tell them is, hey, I've made it to where the microscope is in a usable, functional state. Make sure you don't balance it, make sure you leave it on the lamp that I have chosen, and so you're able to use it for the next week. I'm going to get the parts ordered up, and I'll be back. With Biomed, I go down and I have a little bit more detailed conversation. I explain to them the actual failures, and this is an opportunity for me to kind of prepare them for the service report that they're going to get. So I just tell them, hey, there's a lot of problems. We got a lot of problems with this microscope. The floor brake's not working. The bulbs, I use that as an opportunity to teach them about the bulbs, make sure that they're very clear and understand it's 500 hours and what to look for. And I also tell them, hey, in the future, I'm going to be the one to swap out the bulbs. I'll be the one to date them, to reset them. Just call me out. And some biomeds want to change out their own bulbs. In those instances, what I tell them is, that's fine. Just call me out when you do it, and I'll physically come out. I'm not going to charge you for that time. I'm going to reset the bulbs. That way I can make sure that I'm maintaining your equipment properly. So the next annual PM cycle, I'm not confused by the bulb hour counts. So then I kind of go over everything. I'll say, I'm going to send you the service report. As soon as I get the PO, then I'll have the parts ordered up, and I'll get them all replaced for you. So I kind of just keep it very same deal, a little bit more detailed with Biomed, but very short and sweet. Like, this is what needs to happen, this is what needs repaired, I'm sending you the service report, and I'll get them replaced. All of that comes with that price. Typically what you'll run into, because I've added all the parts, all the repairs,